Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Bull Take Scouting Podcast. It's one of the most exciting weeks on the NFL draft calendar as lots of NFL prospects, over 300 of them, are heading to Indianapolis for the NFL Combine. A lot of big time evaluators, general managers, head coaches will be there as well. And this is an opportunity for prospects to show off their athletic testing numbers, interview with teams, and perform medicals with team doctors. So it's a really, really big step in the draft process. And every year we see some guys rise because they tested through the roof, and some guys fall because their numbers fell short of what people expected. So today we put up a story on our Instagram asking for questions related to the combine. And we're going to start off with really the one that captures what most people are wondering right now. And that's, who are going to be the biggest risers and fallers from this combine. So let's start with the risers. I'm going to preface this by saying there's a lot of guys that I expect to test really well, because the theme of this class for me is all these position groups. They're really small guys who don't hit the weight thresholds that you usually look for. And as a result, they're really athletic. So just thinking about Tank Dell, Zay Flowers, Josh Downs at wide receiver, Bergeron, Duncan, Freeland at tackle, Kalijah Kancey at D tackle could be a 6-foot defensive tackle going in the first round. So I just want to say there's going to be a lot of good athletic testing. But Alex, for you, who's really going to be a big riser?
I mean, to me, I think the first guy that really jumps off the list is the guy that quite a few people think might run the fastest 40 this year. Devin, I want to make sure I say his name right. The running back from Texas A&M, Achane. I'm pretty sure he was a state champion in the 100-meter in high school.
Yeah, and he ran a 20.20 at Texas A&M in the 200-meter, which if you have any track knowledge, that's blazing fast.
Yeah, and you see it on tape too. That he's so fast. He's light, like you mentioned. A lot of these guys are undersized at a lot of these positions. I think he's going to rise with his speed. The interesting thing, well, he might end up weighing under 200 pounds. So there's a limited number of running backs that have been taken high in the draft coming in under 200 pounds. I know Chris Johnson was a guy that was brought up that weighed in under 200 pounds, but obviously ran that blazing fast record 40 at the time at 4.24. So I think Achane will be, a blazing 40, hopefully for him in the 4.2s. And then, he should see his stock rise with that 40, as most of these guys do when they run fast times.
I agree. I think he's one of those guys that we know are going to be one of the fastest, but when he actually runs it, it's still going to make his stock go up because it's just going to be so impressive. And another guy under that category is Jalin Hyatt, the wide receiver from Tennessee, who's honestly, if you look at draft Twitter, especially among these big analysts, he's been really polarizing. There's been a lot of back and forth because he's just a guy who's going to burn you on a go route, but he's very limited in his route tree. He's really only a vertical guy. You can run him on a slant, but right now that's kind of all he's got beyond just a straight go route. But that speed is real, and we're going to see it at the combine. I think it could be an Achane versus Hyatt show off for the fastest 40. I'll agree that maybe Achane is going to take it, but I think both these guys are going under 4.3.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting too, because if we remember last year, a lot of guys were really fast running that 40. Yeah. Then afterwards, it came out that they had that new turf, Lucas Oil Stadium, for the 40-yard dash, and they should have that same turf. It'll be interesting to see if guys are still faster than normal, or if maybe the turf's a little bit worn in. But just a thing to keep an eye on if we see guys. We're expecting a lot of guys to run really fast this year, but if we see even guys run even faster than we expect, it'll just be another thing to keep in mind when we're watching it.
One more under the radar riser for the offensive side of the ball. I think Hyatt's teammate Cedric Tillman could really be a big riser. He got hurt a few games into the season, so everyone kind of forgot about him, especially with Hyatt's emergence. But he's a really tall target who also could crack under 4.4. So that combination of size and speed is going to be really interesting for NFL evaluators. He's got some of the same issues as Hyatt, where his route tree is really limited. You have to give the credit to Josh Heupel because he managed to scheme open these guys so well. I mean, he's got a really brilliant offensive mind, but it does create some questions as to whether or not they'll be able to transition to a more generic wide receiver role in the NFL, but I expect him to put his name back in the buzz and potentially contend for a spot in the top 50 with how fast he might run and just how well he might test throughout the athletic drills.
Yeah, one other guy on the defensive side of the ball that I want to talk about is Mazi Smith, the defensive tackle from Michigan. I mean, I'm a big fan of super strong, powerful guys, and that's exactly what Mazi Smith is. He's, just about 6 feet tall. He weighs about 335 pounds. But he is reportedly super athletic in the weight room and stuff like that. I mean, I think he close grip benched over 500 pounds, which is just absolutely absurd. And I think he should have like a 33-inch vertical, which again, at 6 foot, 330 pounds is wild. The amount of power that he can generate from his legs, just absolutely insane. And I think it was Dane Brugler was talking about in his latest podcast and saying that, with a really, really good combine, he might, bring his name up to the top of the second round and potentially the end of the late first. So that'll be really interesting to see. And, with a great combine, not with, the fastest 40 or anything, but just as one of the big guys doing super impressive things on, the bench, even the 40 for him, the vert, could make his name rise into that, top 40, 45 conversation.
I agree. I could even see him crack the first round because the combination of traits is going to be unreal. One other big guy who I think is going to test through the roof is Zach Harrison. And I was just watching Jalen Duncan tape, offensive tackle from Maryland, a couple hours ago, and Zach Harrison annihilated him like 3 reps in a row. And I watched Harrison back in, December, and that was a good reminder to me of just the traits that he has. He's yet to fully put it together, but I expect him to, perform really well on the bench and also in the athletic testing numbers. So I think he's a guy who could rise into the upper portions of round 2 after the combine.
Yeah, I think we spent enough time talking about some risers in the combine. Obviously, we have risers. We also have fallers in the combine due to, maybe not performing as well as they expect, or maybe guys that were supposed to participate in the combine had an injury, and maybe that's going to make them fall a little bit. So, Costa, who are a couple of names that you think might end up being fallers in the combine?
Yeah, the fallers are really harder to predict than the risers, in my opinion, because sometimes it's just the athleticism is on tape, and then you see the numbers and you're like, whoa, I thought he was going to test better. So you're asking yourself, is he really that athletic? Did he not prepare well enough for the combine? Like I'm thinking Kyler Gordon and Devin Lloyd were 2 examples of that last year where they really just didn't pop as much in the testing as you saw on tape. But I think that one guy who is going to get hurt more by what other people do at his position is Michael Mayer. I really like Michael Mayer. He's my first tight end, and that speaks a lot because I also love Dalton Kincaid. I think they're both top 20 talents in this class, but Kincaid and Luke Musgrave are going to really light up the combine with their athleticism because they're more of your receivers that you're going to trust to, go downfield and be especially receiving weapons, while Mayer is a good receiver as well, for sure, but he's also a very good blocker. That means that he's going to test a little less well athletically. He's a lot bigger of a guy than Kincaid and Musgrave. And one more guy who I think could be a faller is Dwayne McBride, I really love his running ability. He's a running back from UAB. He's tough, powerful. He's got good vision, good enough athleticism. But I think scouts wanted to get a 40 time on him, and he suffered a hamstring injury. He's not going to be able to participate. So that's going to hurt him. And he has 5 career receptions. So when you're looking at a running back, which is already a position that gets devalued, basically no passing down value, and you don't get a 40 time on him at the combine, I could see him sliding, really being the biggest faller, sliding into the late portions of the draft, even though I really think he has starting level running ability.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting what you brought up at the beginning about, it's really hard to predict fallers because I think there's guys on tape that you just watch and you say, they're really good football players, not the best athletically, not the fastest guy, but, just all around really good players. And, I think most people know that going in. So if they have a subpar combine, they don't really fall that much. To me, I agree, what you brought up with Michael Mayer, it's not about how well he tests, it's about how well the people around him test. And those are the 2 tight ends, Kincaid and Musgrave, are extremely athletic. And like you mentioned, Meyer's a little bit more of a across the middle blocking type guy, when Kincaid's more of that, not true wide receiver, but almost only a receiving tight end with limited blocking ability. A little bit smaller, obviously a lot more athletic and quick. And Mayer's athletic in his own right. It's just not on the level of the other two. And it'll be interesting to see, because from what I've heard from analysts and people in the know, it sounds like, it's a race between Kincaid and Meyer for tight end one. And I'm wondering if Mayer just performs average and Kincaid performs, well above average in the combine, if that will be kind of what pushes Kincaid to be the consensus tight end one for a lot of teams and a lot of scouts.
Yeah, I don't think there's going to be a consensus tight end one. I think it's going to be what you're looking for out of a tight end. If you want a guy who blocks really well and catches well, you're going to look for Michael Mayer. If you want a guy who's going to be primarily a receiving option, you want to look for Dalton Kincaid or Luke Musgrave. So I think it might come down to that. One more note on the fallers. I think some of the biggest fallers might be for off-field reasons. So these medicals are extremely important. That was actually the reason that the combine was initially a thing. And we've seen some players in the past really fall because medicals haven't checked out for them. One guy that I think has starting tight end potential in the NFL is Noah Gindorf, who I interviewed, and I would encourage everyone to go check out that interview about a month ago, because he's got a really good combination of traits, but he has two serious injuries in his past. So he's an example of a guy who, if the medicals don't check out, he might not be able to get drafted, even though he certainly has draftable talent. And the other important off-field thing are the interviews. And going back to Mozzie Smith, for example, there's an arrest on his record for gun possession. Will he be able to explain to teams what happened there and deter their concerns about there being future off-field issues when he's in the NFL? So interviews, medicals, those are huge, and those are often reasons why a guy might be able to solidify a draft stock or fall a lot in the draft.
Yeah, I think for a lot of people, right, the medicals and the interviews are almost more important than the on-the-field test. Obviously, you want to check off the box with a 40, and we're not the biggest fans of determining draft stock on testing numbers, because football's not about testing, it's about playing football. But there are a lot of teams that will, if you don't run the 40 fast enough, if you don't check the boxes in the 3-cone drill instead of the shuttle, they'll either take you off their board or bump you down quite a bit. So even though we don't place as big of an emphasis on the testing numbers, a lot of teams do, for whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, just comes down to how you scout. But the medicals, like you were talking about, there's a lot of guys that probably will come up with red flags and medicals that we had no clue about beforehand. So it'll be interesting to kind of make our way through those, the medicals and the interviews as well.
Yep. Well said. All right, let's move on to our next question, which regards one of the biggest headlines of the week, and that's the decision of Anthony Richardson, CJ Stroud, and Will Levis to throw at the combine, and Bryce Young to not throw. And so, we know one of the big headlines will be, what is Bryce Young's weight? It sounds like he's planning to weigh in at the combine, but not perform any of these drills or these tests. And then at the pro day, he's not going to weigh, but then he's going to perform the drills, which, what do you make of all of this? And do you think it's going to impact Bryce Young's draft stock in any way? Or is it really just going to be, he's probably the best quarterback in this draft anyway. We know he's small, doesn't matter. Let's just take him because he's that good.
Yeah, I think there's a fairly big gap between Young and the rest of the quarterbacks with, NFL readiness and just what they have on tape right now. So I do agree he's the best quarterback on film. And I think because there is a little bit bigger of a gap than maybe we've seen in years past, I don't think the measurements are going to affect him that much. I think if, for example, him and Stroud were neck and neck, I think that would hurt him a lot. And I think a lot of teams wouldn't be big fans of that. But I think because he has placed himself ahead of the other three, I think that will allow the measurements and the testing, whatever, to not really knock him that much. I'm not a big fan of the decision. I think you can either just weigh in, do the tests, whatever, or just say, you know what, like I'm not going to do either one.
Yeah.
Everyone knows what he's doing. If you're weighing in and not doing the tests, and then doing the tests and not weighing in at your pro day, everybody knows what's going on. To me, it's the same exact.
Spell it out to our audience.
All
real
right,
quick.
so basically, Bryce Young, if you haven't heard, is pretty small by QB standards. He might come in at under 6 feet, and then he is rumored to be playing at 175 to 180 or 180 pounds at Bama this season. He's reportedly bulking up to maybe 200. Obviously, by adding those 20 pounds, he's going to run a lot slower than he would have at his normal playing weight. To me, right, I don't really care. Everyone knows that's not going to be your playing weight. So what's really the point of putting on that weight anyways? If he was planning on saying, you know what, I'm just bulking up and I'm going to play at 195 and that's just going to be me, great. Do it, but then run the drills. By weighing in, not running the drills, and then running the drills and not weighing in, we know you're losing weight to do the drills as best as you can. And we know you're not going to play at the weight that you weighed into the combine. So to me, what's the point, right? Just get it over with. You're going to be small regardless. It is what it is. You're the best quarterback in the draft.
Yeah, I totally agree with that statement. Let's talk cornerbacks for a second, because this is a really interesting race for the top cornerback in the class. And so we had two questions about this, actually. The first one asked, who really is the best cornerback in the class, not just the most hyped? And the next question was, is Devin Witherspoon from Illinois the top cornerback in the class? So, Alex, would you like to take us through right now what's going on at the top of your cornerback rankings?
Yeah, so to me, I'm not really 100% set on my cornerback rankings yet. I think there's a good number of guys that are in that top cornerback ranking. I think more than we've had in years past. To me, right now, I have Christian Gonzalez as my top cornerback in the class. I think he's experienced, which to me is important. I think he has 3 seasons of starting experience. Some of the other guys have less. He's long. He has, decent size. He's about 6'2", 200 pounds, I think, is what his reported weight and height is. So to me, right, I love the size, speed, fluidity, athleticism. To me, it's all there. Ball skills. So, yeah, that's why Christian Gonzalez right now is my cornerback 1. I think Joey Porter Jr. And Devin Witherspoon are also very good corners. I'm not going to say that, that will be my cornerback rankings by April. But at the moment, I have Christian Gonzalez as my cornerback 1.
Yeah, I have, pretty solidly Christian Gonzalez 1, Joey Porter 2, Devin Witherspoon 3. But I think they're all top 15 players in this class. I love Gonzalez for all the reasons you said. I mean, I think he's built in a lab in terms of height, weight, speed, great ball skills too. He's a wide receiver background. I really just can't see that many holes in Gonzalez's game. I think he's a future All-Pro. Porter has, traits that are pretty much just as good. There's just the one thing with him is I'd like to see him grab less. And, there are some guys who get to the NFL and they can get that out of their game. It gets coached out of their game. J.C. Horn relied heavily on grabbing the receiver in college and getting away with it, or, just taking the 15-yard penalty because that's the rule in college for a PI. And then in the NFL, we've seen that when he's healthy, he's a really good cornerback, and that's not really an issue anymore. So I think a similar thing could happen with Joey Porter. That's why I'm pretty confident with him. And then Devin Witherspoon, honestly, I mean, he would be my cornerback 1 in other classes. It's just those two guys are so good. I think that he's just a tick below them in, pure coverage ability. I see him sometimes lose a step on a sudden receiver who's coming in and out of his break or on a comeback route. And then there's also, the fact that he's might weigh in at less than 180 pounds. And I don't think it impacts him that much. But when you're talking about Gonzalez and Porter, who are at or near 200 pounds and they're just as athletic as Witherspoon, I think it's justifiable to hold that a little bit against Witherspoon.
So we're talking about how this is a really, really good cornerback class. So where would you put these 3 guys in comparison to the top 3 from last year and coming out of college, and Sauce, Derek Stingley, and why am I blanking on the third one?
Was there a third one?
Yeah, there was. You got him as your cornerback too.
I'm pulling it up real quick.
Please do. I don't know why I'm blanking.
Trent McDuffie.
Yes. So where would you rank these three in comparison to the three from last year?
Yeah, so I put Sauce first. Sauce he was a second player behind Hutchinson for me, and I thought long and hard about making him one. That's how much I love
I
Sauce.
think the only reason that I didn't have him one was because of positional value, which looking back on it, I shouldn't have put positional value into consideration. Sauce was
Hutch is going to be a hell of a player too. You can't go wrong.
They both are. They both are.
Yep. And then I would go all three of the guys in this class after that. I think that's how good they are. I have Gonzalez as a top 10 grade. I think he's a top 5 non-quarterback in this class. Right now I've got Anderson, then Carter, and then Tyree Wilson, and then Christian Gonzalez right now if we're talking non-quarterbacks. And then I have Witherspoon. I Porter and Witherspoon right outside the top 10, whereas McDuffie and Stingley were like just inside the top 20 in grading for me. So that's how I would stack them.
Yeah, I think I'd do that as well. I think Stingley. I remember I bumped Stingley because of his lack of production his last year and the injury concerns.
Yes.
I think without the injury concerns, I think he'd be pretty close to the other two from this class. But again, grades where I had them coming out of college, all things considered, yeah, I agree. It'd be Sauce, the three from this year, and then obviously I had Stingley and then McDuffie.
Yep. I just want to throw out one other cornerback name that I think is completely lost in the shuffle, but Clark Phillips, the second from Utah, is a surefire first-round talent in my book, and it feels like I haven't heard his name in months. During the college football season, there was talk about him as a first-round prospect. I have no idea where that's gone. I'm hoping it's just the media that hasn't been talking about him, and he's still highly regarded by NFL teams. He's a little undersized, but he's got terrific coverage skills, and I think he's going to be a really good player. So yeah, it's a really good cornerback class. It's deep too. You're going to find quality starters on day 2. So definitely a fantastic class. Now moving on to our last question. Someone asked us who our favorite late round offensive line prospects are. And one guy I like is the Michigan center, Olu Oluwatimi, who I think is going to turn out a little bit like Michael Onwenu, where people are going to go for flashier guys who have a better combination of traits, but I think he was a rock solid starter, and I can see him being picked on day 3 and then becoming a serviceable NFL starter. So that's a guy I like later in the draft. And I also like Braden Daniels, who I interviewed over the summer, who's a little bit different from Oluwatimi. He's more athletic. He has higher upside. You kind of just want to fill out his frame more and take care of a few technical points, but he could be going on day 3 and definitely has starting potential as well.
Yeah, unfortunately, I haven't been able to get to some of the late or any of the late round offensive tackles yet, so I think you'll just have to go with what Costa's saying right now, and then I'll do my best to work around to those a little bit later in the scouting process.
So is anything else that you've got on your mind with the combine this week?
One thing that I wanted to talk about a little bit more, we talked about Bryce Young quite a bit. I kind of want to talk about the other quarterbacks in terms of the combine.
Yep.
Anthony Richardson, I think, is going to be the star of the show. I think everybody kind of knows that. Something interesting that I heard somewhere that's something to be considered is C.J. Stroud's the quarterback throwing right after Anthony Richardson.
That's interesting.
So it is interesting because obviously Anthony Richardson has a monster arm. He can launch it, and Stroud's arm isn't bad. It's it's near Anthony Richardson's though. So just kind of wondering how you think that kind of affects how people watch C.J. Stroud throw the ball, because you'd like to say that it doesn't. You look at each guy in a vacuum, but it does. It's going to underwhelm his performance a little bit, and I'm wondering what you think about how that's going to shake everything out.
Yeah, I think the combine has such a sway because so many of these evaluators are there in person. And while a lot of the college scouts and the area scouts were watching them in person during the fall, these GMs who are ultimately going to be making the picks, they don't see them in person during live games. They see them in person at the combine. So when your image of them is going to be what you saw in person of them throwing on the field, and you're meeting with them, at the combine later, if you bring them into your facility for an official visit, And that's why I think that it shouldn't have an effect, but it could have an effect positively for Richardson and negatively for Stroud, that Richardson's just going to look better at the combine. Turn on the tape and you're immediately going to see that Stroud's the better quarterback prospect. I mean, I really like CJ Stroud. He's honestly, for me, pretty close behind Bryce Young. I think those two are franchise quarterbacks in the NFL. And then after that, you're kind of guessing. You're really hoping that you can coach Anthony Richardson into being a good quarterback. Same thing with Will Levis. There's a lot of work to be done on both those guys. But, going back to it, I think it could really help Richardson because he's just going to pop so much in front of these evaluators who the decision makers are seeing these guys in person for maybe the first time.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I never really thought about that point that you mentioned about the GM. That's the only image they're going to see really of them in person. Obviously, some of them will go to the pro days as well, but you're going to see the same thing. So I never really thought about that before. It's an interesting thing to think about. One more thought experiment about the quarterbacks. Obviously, I'm in the same boat as you. Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, 1 and 2. But I was thinking today about the best quarterbacks in the league right now and how many of them were projects. If we list off our top 5, it's, in really no specific order. I'd say Mahomes, Josh Allen. I would put Jalen Hurts close to the top 5 at the moment. I would say Justin Herbert, and I would say probably Joe Burrow. And if we look back at scouting, Burrow was the only one that wasn't like a true project. I mean, Herbert flashed right away. He played a lot better than we thought, but a lot of people thought of him as more of a project, big arm guy coming in. So how does that weigh in your evaluation of quarterbacks?
It's definitely, helped these quarterbacks. I have a late first round grade on Anthony Richardson, whereas 5 years ago, I would have been thinking of him as a third round prospect because there just wasn't the same track record of these project quarterbacks panning out in the NFL. And now that you have these guys, as you brought up, it's definitely helping them. But I don't think you can just take a huge leap of faith, though. I think you still have to be rational and consider a lot of project quarterbacks haven't worked out just because a few really good coaches and, really talented, smart, hardworking quarterbacks made it work and progressed so much in their games to become elite NFL quarterbacks. That doesn't mean we're going to be getting that many of them. And that's why I think that, Anthony Richardson is a guy who's worth taking a shot on late in the first round, but I would never spend a top 10 pick on him. So I think you got to find the right balance. You don't dock the guy because he just honestly isn't a good quarterback right now. He absolutely has the traits where it's worth it to a certain extent, but top 10 is too rich.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. I think it makes you more willing to take a chance on a guy because we've seen it work out. I mean, Lamar's another guy. I know he's been injured, but he was another guy that we did not have first round grades on coming out. And I feel like, looking back on it, if Lamar was coming out in 2023, I probably would have a first round grade because there's, different things you can do as a quarterback. And I think Trevor Lawrence would be the other guy that's come out recently that wasn't, a project, so to speak. But a lot of these guys at the top of the league right now just so happen to be projects. I think you can be successful either way. I think it's harder for a project QB, but I think put in the right situation, assuming that they have the work ethic and the willingness to take 2 to 3 years to really learn and develop into a quarterback, I think most of them probably do have the higher ceiling, which is why I think the projects that have panned out tend to be at the top of the league.
Absolutely. Well, it's going to be fun watching these quarterbacks, watching everyone else. I'm excited to see who are the guys that we didn't mention that we're going to be talking about in a week, either guys who perform really well or not well. And, all the rumors that are about to come out. It's been really quiet on that front, but now with everyone together, talking, all these big decision makers, they're going to be talking deals. Maybe things heat up for the first pick. That's going to be really interesting. That's also one of the main things to watch this week. I'm really excited.
Yeah, I mean, these GMs can't hold back from talking about whatever they want to talk about. So it's really interesting. Always love to hear the rumors that come out of Combine Week. I'm sure we'll have a bunch of rumors for you guys once the Combine's over. So thanks, everyone, for watching. Thanks for listening. We'll be back with another post-Combine episode next week.